Well, hello there, how is everyone? I hope you're well on this fabulous, fabulous Friday. And do you know what else is fabulous? You. Yeah, you. That's it, you. Fabulous. This is video 2, by the way. Video 2 of 2. I'm not doing 3 today. Not doing 3. I couldn't do it. I've done enough. And I'm getting old. I'm 43 years old. 43 years old. Where does the time go? Anyway. Knife sheath. We're talking knife sheath because, and the reason why I'm talking knife sheath is because this bloody knife sheath seems to be the thing that most people looking at and saying, do you know what? That knife sheath proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Bryan Kohberger did this crime. Absolutely. Absolutely did it. And no one's going to tell me otherwise because the only person who could have done this crime is a person who left that there. Explain it away. Tell me how that could have got there if he didn't put it there. Easy. Absolutely easy. Look, first of all, I've said this a couple of times. We have been conditioned. We've been conditioned to think about this crime in certain ways. We've been conditioned to believe that the person who did this crime was driving a white Hyundai Elantra. We don't know if that's true. We don't know. We just think it is because of how it's been worded, how it's been given to us. But ultimately, the fact remains is we don't know what car the perpetrator was driving. Even if they had a car, we don't know that. We know that Bryan Kohberger drives a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra. We know that law enforcement at one stage were looking for a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra with occupant or occupants inside it that they wanted to speak to reference this crime. That's all we know. And then what's happened as time has progressed, we have, like I say, we've been kind of programmed, conditioned to think, oh, so the killer was driving a white Hyundai Elantra. Bryan Kohberger has a white Hyundai Elantra. Oh my God, what a coincidence. That must mean that Bryan Kohberger is the killer because we've got him driving a white Hyundai Elantra. We know the killer was driving a white Hyundai Elantra. Oh, and also we've got a knife sheath inside that building with his DNA on it. But like I say, that's not the case. And you have to wind back and understand. The white Hyundai Elantra is there because it was on video. But what we also have to understand is that it's not beyond the realms of possibility that there were multiple white Hyundai Elantras driving around there that night. Not when there are so many of them that live in the damn area. But I digress. What I'm saying is it could have been Bryan, certainly, but they do have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And the car is going to be a hard one to prove unless they've got Bryan Kohberger himself on video. That's a fact. But the knife sheath. Let's talk about the knife sheath. So what do we know about the knife sheath? The knife sheath is a K-bar knife sheath, specific to a K-bar military weapon. But what we do know is that there's a potential that that's not the weapon that was used. Because if we listen to what Kathy Mabbutt said, and also what Steve Gonsalves said, and when they were talking about what information had been handed over to their family, the Gonsalves family, by Kathy Mabbutt, that would at least let you make you think that there's multiple weapons. And they don't, and the descriptions don't necessarily go hand in hand with this weapon, the K-bar knife. Now, I'm going to get a little bit graphic here, so this is a trigger warning, okay? But what I want you to think of is this. What do we know in the PCA? We know that as law enforcement have approached and they've seen these students who are sadly deceased, they are able to tell how they were deceased, why they were deceased. Now, if they were fully clothed and there was so much blood everywhere, so much, how was it apparent from a distance or on approach and without physically investigating them and, you know, I mean, lifting up clothes and looking at specific injuries, how would they have known how this happened? If the weapon used was what we believe and we have been conditioned to believe was the weapon that was used. I don't know, because I don't want to get too graphic, because I'm conscious about it. But think about it. You know, I don't think that a specific injury from a distance and covered in clothes and covered in blood would have looked like a different injury as well. Could have been caused by a different type of weapon altogether. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is we don't know that this sheath has anything to do with this crime. We don't know that. We can believe it. We can certainly take the whole overarching crime and think, well, it just makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense that we have been told that this is what happened, and we just so happen to have this K-bar knife sheath that was apparently where it was, underneath one of the victims, underneath a comforter. So it kind of semi-makes sense. So if we scrap that and we decide to accept that that's part of the crime, it's got to be part of the crime, even if there was multiple weapons, which I believe is going to be the case. I believe that there is going to be a situation where we find out later on down the line that there was multiple weapons used, which then you've got to consider, was there multiple people involved? Who knows? Because that will then look at whether people are right-handed, left-handed, and all this sort of things, and they will have to bring specialists in to to look. They can tell pretty much how tall someone would have to be to deliver specific injuries to people. Anyway, but that's for the specialists. But the K-bar knife sheath. So the K-bar knife sheath has got no DNA on it apart from one piece of DNA that's on the button snap that's underneath. So as you look at the knife, that button snap that goes together goes round the handle of the knife that clasps it in. But nothing else. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that at some point that knife has been cleaned. That sheath has been cleaned. 100%. It's been cleaned. It's been wiped down. Or it wouldn't have been a single source. It would have been multiple sources on there, and it would have been one hell of a problem to pull DNA from it. Because what you've got to think is DNA can get onto leather quite easily. Leather is a porous material, very, very porous, and it would be a DNA magnet, especially if someone is sweaty, if they're, if you think what someone would be like going into this crime for the first time and they're holding this sheath, they would be, it'd be covered in something, you get something. But then you've got to think, well, they had gloves on. Surely they definitely had gloves on when they were doing this. So that takes that away. So then you think to yourself, well, so Bryan Kohberger must have entered into this house with gloves on if he was the person who did it. So the DNA didn't get put on that knife sheath in that building, did it? Because he must have been wearing gloves, or there'd have been more than just that little bit of DNA. There'd have been DNA all over it. So we know whoever did this crime was wearing gloves. Are you with me so far? So, like I say, at the moment we're in a situation where we know that the DNA didn't get put on the knife sheath during the crime. So you then have to succumb to the idea that before the knife sheath entered the home, the DNA from Bryan Kohberger was already on it. Are you with me so far? So, if you have to admit and you have to succumb to the thought that the DNA must have been on the knife sheath prior to entering the home, you then have to be able to explain where that knife sheath has been before it's entered the home. Where exactly was that, and when was that DNA put onto the knife sheath? Because there would be an argument here that the person who did the crime, at every point with which they were handling said knife sheath, they would have been wearing gloves. So at no point would they have wanted their DNA to be on that weapon. Why would they have handled a knife sheath that they knew they were taking to a crime at any point without gloves on? We're supposed to be led to believe that Bryan Kohberger had gloves on all the time. He was even segregating rubbish at his parents' house in the depths of night wearing gloves. But then we're supposed to believe that at some point Bryan Kohberger handled the very knife that he would use to do this crime without gloves on, because that is the only way that his DNA would have got on the button snap. But what makes more sense to me is that somebody has been handling this with gloves, but they've cleaned it all, they've wiped it all down, and they've left specifically the button snap. They've left it. And why would somebody else leave it? Because they know that they haven't touched it, because they've always handled it with gloves. But they know without a doubt that the person with which that come from has likely touched at least that button snap. That's just my idea. And again, this is my critical mind. But I can't fathom why somebody with Bryan Kohberger's knowledge, if he indeed is the person who did it, why he would have handled that knife sheath at any point in time without gloves. If he was always going to use it, if it was bought for that purpose. Because that's just another mistake that you're then saying that he made. And I don't believe that he would have made that mistake. I believe that if Bryan Kohberger had have brought that knife specifically to do this crime, then I believe that man would have always handled that knife with gloves on. Let me know down below. I'm off. I've worked my brain too much. I've worked it too much. Again, you're amazing. You've been amazing this week, by the way. And I hope you have a fantastic, fantastic weekend. Until next time.